Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, we're talking to Ed Bukont. He is a systems integrator that really gets it when talking to management, whoever's bankrolling the place, plus all the technology. Got great advice, including a discussion about mentors of merit. That's coming up next on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support online at bgs.cc. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by the CalRec Type R console system. Type R is a brand new, modular, expandable IP-based radio system from CalRec Audio. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee. And just delighted to have Telos Alliance gear all around me here. And thanks to Telos for giving me a couple hours off on Thursdays to put this show together and to bring it to you. This is our 477th episode. So my goodness, we've been doing this for over 10 years now. And we really appreciate you, engineers who are friends and colleagues and people we haven't met yet. Thank you for watching and listening to This Week in Radio Tech. I just ask that you subscribe to the show, whether it's on YouTube or through your favorite podcatching program. We try to put all the links for all the podcatching programs and the RSS feeds on the website, thisweekinradiotech.com. So check that out if you would. And also thanks to GFQ for producing and distributing our show. All right. Hey, before we get much farther, let's bring in Gary Klein. He's live in Paris. Oh, Gary's disconnected? Oh, no. Okay. Oh, I saw the message. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to have Gary Klein on a future show reporting from Salon de la Radio in Paris with some interesting new products and new ideas that goes on at this European radio show every January or February. This year it's in January. All right. Well, without further ado, then let's introduce our guest for the rest of the show, and that is my friend. He's been on our show before. It's been a while. It's Ed or Edwin Bukont. Ed, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech.
Thank you. Hello.
Good to see you.
Same. It's I think the last time I was on, we talked about specialty microphones.
Oh, really? Okay. And I know we've talked about audio over IP and projects that you're doing. You've Ed, I really like a lot of your posts on Facebook when it comes to technology. You have such a broad range of technologies that you deal with. And we're going to be talking about not only the technologies, but managing expectations with the technologies and managing expectations with the folks who may be bankrolling a facility and how you can help meet or manage their expectations as an engineer. We're going to get into that during the show. Would you like to kind of give us a little taste, warm us up for what you're going to be talking about?
Maybe a little bit. So when you were just talking to Gary, you talked about this bicycle studio. And when we talked about doing the show, we were talking about challenges and successes. Mid-90s, when the folks at Comrex had their two-line system out, we were trying to use it in a moving vehicle. And after some false starts working with the cellular carriers, we did a two-line Comrex in a Master Cruiser, one of Doug Clark's creations, I think it was. And we did 70 miles an hour around the Beltway using a T-shirt cannon to fire shirts out the back until Maryland State Police told us that was somewhat illegal. But the technical side is we tested this thing ad nauseum till I had the perfect spacing of the right antennas on the top of the vehicle so that as we drove around, the phones didn't fight with each other or with the cell towers. We did the show, nothing disconnected. We did an article in Radio World on it. And I got a call from the then president of Comrex saying, don't write any more articles. Everybody's yelling at me because they don't want to spend what you did to do it. And then they say it doesn't work. So it was that was an education.
That sounds like a taste of what we're going to have. And just for my fellow engineers and friends who are listening or watching, one of our topics that Ed loves that he's been really studying and it's on his heart to talk about is helping management to understand the difference between broadcast engineering, RF, audio, wiring, and engineering the management process, which evolves, but doesn't have to change as technology changes. That's one topic. We're going to talk about pushing the envelope. We're going to talk about failing forward, and I want to hear Ed's thoughts on exactly what that means. Plus, we're going to have a couple of success stories all coming up on This Week in Radio Tech. Hey, I want to remind you that our show is brought to you in part by my friend Josh Bone at Max Connect Wireless. You see, if you're watching the show, I'm holding up this Cradle Point modem, and the fact that it's a Cradle Point modem ain't so special, okay? But what's inside in terms of the SIM cards is special. It's Max Connect Wireless, and this is a special arrangement that Max Connect Wireless has with AT&T, with Verizon, and now also with T-Mobile. And you pick your favorite carrier or the carrier that you think has the best coverage where you need to broadcast from, or you can put two carriers in here. I've got AT&T and Verizon in my Max Connect Wireless. And here's the deal. This isn't just an ordinary hotspot. Because of the Max Connect Wireless SIM card, you get priority data over everybody else except first responders. That means you can be at a parade, at a big ball game, you can be at a huge public concert or event, and you, the broadcaster, doing a live remote broadcast, you have connectivity, you have data passage, you have packets that are passing usually without error. Even if everybody else around you is using the same carrier and getting slow response because of so much saturation on the tower site, Max Connect Wireless is not subject to the tower site saturation because you have priority. It's really cool, and I just got to use this a couple weeks ago in Cleveland, Mississippi, when we had internet totally removed by a tornado from our radio station, and for a couple of days, I supplied internet via Max Connect Wireless to our radio stations in Cleveland, Mississippi. And guess what? It wasn't just, overloaded, saturated Wi-Fi or MiFi type of hotspot. It was guaranteed data, and it worked great. Thanks a lot, Max Connect Wireless, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. You can go to the website at maxconnectwireless.com. Spelled funny. Look for the link in our show notes or take a note of what it is right now. All right. I'm Kirk Harnack in the Telos Alliance studio. Chris Tobin is likely to not be with us today. He's having some meetings in New York City, and I don't know if he can tell us about those secret meetings or not when he comes back, but it is going to be Ed Bukont and me chatting about some really interesting topics, because Ed gets to spend a lot of time building studios, managing projects, being both in the weeds and managing things. And then he also gets to be the interface with management, the people bankrolling a studio build, the people who are managing, the whole process. And that puts Ed in a pretty interesting situation. Ed, you're a very good observer of how people work together, how they manage, and what their expectations are, and how you manage that. I wonder if you could, before we get into some technical stuff, if you could talk about that process of dealing with, you're dealing with customers who have an expectation of a studio build, and how you work with them to, get their expectations right, and maybe even make their socks roll up and down when it comes to, the end result.
The tendency is to ask the customer, so to speak, whether that's the bank or the owner or the manager, whatever, what they need. But they may not know what they need. That's why they came to you. So what I like to ask is, what are you trying to do? And you may get, well, my buddy in Cleveland, Mississippi did this, and I want this. Okay. So you start trying to find out what is their frame of reference. Where have they been? What have they done? What do they expect? And you want to put things in not only their terms, if you can, but in the terms that their other supporting people will use. Yeah, everybody has a lot of angst about working with IT. But if you walk into a meeting with IT spouting jargon that you know and they don't, or using words that may mean something different to them, you've already shut down the conversation before it even started. If you put together an equipment list and you mention a term, a blade, well, that means something to IT people in terms of the cost of something that goes in a frame. Well, you have to understand where they're coming from. A lot of organizations now, if there's anything IT in the project, they run the whole project by IT for approval. And these words, if there's stuff in there that IT thinks means something, you might see something rejected either out of technology or budget because you didn't present it in a manner that others are going to understand. Radio is a very small niche business that is highly evolved, but nobody outside of our industry knows about it. And so there's so many examples. The average IT person can do just fine getting a computer online for you. They have no idea what audio over IP is yet. KVM is still a mystery to a lot of people, being able to put your computer in a closet and extend it to where you need it to be. There is any myriad of times that the conversation is stopped even before it started.
Okay. It's interesting. You mentioned in some thoughts about this topic. You said IT doesn't know what they don't know, and I got to agree with you, because there's uses of IT that we as radio engineers make. We put IT to use in ways that the IT department never has. And so IT doesn't know what they don't know, and management doesn't know that they don't know it either. And I probably a good example of this that I've come across in my work with the TELUS Alliance has been, ever since the early 2000s, audio over IP uses Ethernet switches, properly configured, and typically it's going to be a Cisco switch, although the other brands now are really getting on board with the right protocols and the right behaviors to properly handle AES67, for example. But a lot of times we would have to really let the customer know, hey, even though there's the Cisco switch in here, it doesn't need to be handled by your IT department. It's part of the audio thing that you're buying. And it doesn't even have to be connected to the rest of your department. It's doing an audio function. It's not doing an IT function that the IT department has to worry about. And we just said that as a preemptive, thing to, if we thought there'd be a problem with IT saying, oh, no, we got switches, don't worry about buying any of those, or we'll manage it. And then sadly, more often than not, if IT managed that switch, well, the audio over IP network wouldn't work because they hadn't yet learned the particular functions that AOIP needs. Is that along the lines of what you're really driving at, Ed?
That is part of it. So, and you're right. Especially we've now had audio over IP as a serious contender in radio for 15 some years. And when we first started talking about this, it was an all Cisco world, and when you talk to the help desk, the ordering people that you have in most organizations, businesses, colleges, government, where a lot of this was first being used, the front line has no idea what you're talking about. They don't even know what a UDP is. They're all in the TCP IP world. So you have to keep pushing. You get the vendor to give you some notes that maybe you can email over, or back then we faxed them, and try to push it up the food chain. You might have to go to the CIO before you get someone in the organization who goes, oh, those higher protocols, yeah, we handle that with a different department. The state of Maryland outsources those. They have somebody who comes in for special projects. It's not handled in-house at all. It took, on one project, nearly 15 months to find that person. So,
oh my goodness.
Condensing it down to a sheet of paper of protocols in their language that they can then disseminate internally helps. They don't know about broadcast. They know nothing about audio. A lot of times they don't conceive that we're doing mission critical work. They think we'll put it in the workflow. We'll get your wiring done when we do. We'll let you know. It's just, it takes a lot of communication. You need to find in the organization what we like to call a champion, someone who's going to pick up your ball and run with it. Yeah. That may not be your manager. maybe somebody else, and maybe somebody in the business office who thinks, okay, I know how to work this. Non-technical communication is key. You have to get around it, forget the technology that's going to change, and learn how to function in the organization.
That's pretty interesting. You said non-technical communication is key. And Ed, a lot of your projects are government projects, right? You're dealing with
the last couple of years have been, yes.
Yeah. And you know, there's a lot of hierarchy there, and there's a lot of, you know, I don't know, silos, fiefdoms, and yeah, not our department, or no, we don't do that. So you're right. It's now my experience tends to be with smaller broadcasters where you're talking to the chief cook and bottle washer, you know, the whole time, right?
But that's evolving a little bit, because even the mom and pop stations now, they have no idea what to do with IT. So they brought in a local IT contractor. And then as the phones go away, they convert to voice over IP. They don't call the broadcast guy. They call the VoIP guy. They come in and you get a phone call saying, oh, so-and-so is here over the weekend. We got new phones, but nothing in the studio works. They're not even thinking to call the broadcast person for the IT role, even at the small stations. Now, I have some clients who are, you know, they'll call me and say, oh, we got somebody coming in. Should it be anything we should be worried about? How you get into that conversation early enough is by being, as much as you can, part of that team that isn't just doing the radio thing, but is part of the client or the customer's thought process for anything technology-wise. Even if you're not handling technology, help them to understand how technology is handled. What are the questions? What are the assumptions? Because the IT people can be pretty reasonable as long as they're not blindsided either.
So we may end up naming the this show about this, but you had a little story about something you heard from Steve Church. Because we're kind of talking about two different things. We're talking about non-technical conversations and how important those are in a hierarchical situation where you need to get things done for the sake of the broadcast. But then you also get to apply the technology, and that you know, that's kind of what we like to do. We like to apply the technology. Right. What was your Steve Church conversation about?
So a long time ago, I was thrown a project with all of a week to get it together, and that was to do, it was for Voice of America, a Talk to America show on AIDS. Imagine 100 phone lines in 42 different languages, and somehow you need phone hybrids and delay lines for all of this. And Steve Church had told me when I helped on another project, if I ever needed something, just call him. So I called. I said, I need 10 hybrids by Thursday. He said, I'll call you back. And I thought, oh, well. Then 2 hours later, he called and said, oh, I got 9 of them coming. I'll bring the 10th with me. You can pick me up at the airport Thursday morning. I had Steve helping me for 2 days. And at that point, this was mid-'80s, the conversation had come around again to, should we be licensed and registered engineers? And Steve said, we don't want to be licensed and registered. We're not engineers. This has stuck with me. We are artists in the application of science. And if you fast forward that to today, I think that applies to a term that the IT industry has called front-end engineers, who are the people that take the hardware and the user expectations and try to meld them. These are the people who are dealing with the GUI and whatever of your desktop. They're not worried about the hardware. They're worried about what does it do. And you know, Telos products are that way. He's always made an art out of the science.
We're gonna take a short break right here, and I want to warn our producer we're gonna flip the order of the ads in this break because you just said artists in the application of science, and I want to show you something on screen here, and I'll try to describe it too, that I think applies very well. Look at what I'm holding up. This is an under-counter headphone amp, an under-counter headphone amp from Angry Audio. And look, it's got these sexy curves to it. That means that no more snagged pants on this headphone amp. You bolt it up under the counter, and Look at this. If your leg hits it, it's not a problem. Because it's curved. It's really beautiful. There's not much to snag your pants on this thing. This is from Angry Audio. It's a headphone amp. It can look at this. It's got the Studio Hub style connectors on the back. It can be powered over Studio Hub, or it can be powered with a local 16-volt AC power cord. And by the way, if you power it with 16 volts AC, it injects power for the next amp down the line in the Studio Hub Standard if you want that. So that's pretty cool. That's from Angry Audio at angryaudio.com. And one more thing I want to point out, and hey, if you're a fan of this show, This Week in Radio Tech, please pay attention to this for just a second. We've been talking about giving away free 7-foot Studio Hub cables. These are Cat 5 cables, nicely terminated. And if you're getting the Studio Hub adapters like this one that have the female RJ45 on them, and so many hundreds, if not thousands of studios are wired with this, you can still get your free cable, but you gotta tell your dealer, I heard it on This Week in Radio Tech. They're putting us to the test. Please help us. So you call your dealer, you're gonna order some even if you don't need any of these, order them, because you're gonna need them. And order the female XLR, the male XLR, order them with RCA plugs, whatever you think you might need. Even if you don't need them, please order them and say, I want my free cable, because you get a free 7-foot patch cable with every single one of these you order if you tell your dealer, I want my free cable, because Kirk Harnack told me on TWiRT that I could have them. So if you order 10 adapters, guess what? You get 10 cables. Do it. Thank you. I appreciate it very, very much. And Angry Audio will appreciate it too. We want to show our value to Angry Audio. Hey, we got a quick spot break. We'll be right back with more from Ed Bukont and some exciting stories coming up.
TWiRT is CalRec's first native IP-based mixing console. It is fully AES67 and NMOS ISO4 and ISO5 compatible as defined by SMPTE 2110. Connectivity via Cat5e utilizing COT switches and power to the surface is supplied via standard PoE switches to minimize cabling. Its 2U core has integrated I/O, so you're instantly up and running, and it can power up to 3 independent mixing environments, each with their own separate DSP resources. TWiRT's surface is modular and expandable, consisting of 3 slimline panels, each of which are user-definable with layouts saved and recalled quickly between shows. It's available in 4 DSP packs, and as your station grows, larger packs can be added, making TWiRT the most flexible radio console you can buy. Find out more at calrec.com/TWiRT.
Thanks a lot to CalRec for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech, and go to calrec.com/TWiRT. Okay, it's Kirk Harnack here along with Edwin Bukont, and we're going to see if Chris Tobin is going to be able to join us. Is Chris here? Is he here? Yes, no? Oh, no, he's not. Okay, sorry. Thought he was. Talking to Ed Bukont about some engineering issues and stories, dealing with management. The key conversations are those that are not technical. Oh my goodness, that is so true, and we so often forget that. But Ed, you've got a number of things we wanted to chat about, and one of them is pushing the envelope. What do you mean by pushing the envelope?
It can be a couple of different ways. I didn't come up in the broadcast business through studio maintenance and transmitters like a lot of folks have. My background is actually in multi-track recording and some live sound. So when I started building studios, a lot of what people were doing traditionally, I was asking questions about. Why do we have this? Why do we have that? Why? There's other ways of doing things. And we have to do that. A ship sitting in the harbor is safe, but that's not the purpose of a ship. So you're doing things, it's not enough to call the vendor and say, hey, I want to do this, sell me something. You ask questions. Why am I buying this? Why is he recommending that? You look at industries, allied industries, AV, the medical technology industry, its use of audio over IP, its use of audio and video, low voltage wiring is a whole world unto itself that we can learn from when we're trying to figure out how to get a signal across a building, maybe through an area that's difficult to wire in, or we have security issues. Other industries are doing this, and they've developed means and methods that are new to us that might be useful. We used to laugh at audiovisual back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The audiovisual industry has developed camera and control systems that are equal to broadcast, but they're different, and they're not cheap, and they're not simple. You can buy in AV industry products. They handle 12 cameras over IP with PTZ and audio, and switch and produce a stream. And there isn't any broadcast device or manufacturer in there, but you wouldn't know the difference as the end user between that and a $4 million production complex. So when you start doing something, look for what can you do different to make it. We have the triple constraint of project management. What can you do that will make it faster, better, or cheaper? You get to pick two, and the other you don't get to control.
Well, there's some advice that you typed in some show notes having to do with broadcast cycles have become IT minded, short durations, not decades. And also about in this concept of failing forward. And I like this idea. We used to build, what's the word I'm looking for? Tributes to ourselves. We used to build really highly sophisticated and fancy, and we used to build studios that, by golly, could only be a radio studio forever and ever, amen. It could never be anything else. And we need to be a little bit more flexible. We need to think, hey, guess what? I'm going to build a studio that if it doesn't work out for the first purpose they wanted, it's still a good studio for something else. We could do podcasts in here. We could do video in here. It's important to fail forward. And I'm trying to think, what does fail forward mean? Well, it means building things that could do something else if the first thing doesn't work out. Am I on track?
That is one aspect of it.
Okay.
But what I'm looking at is everybody's afraid. Some of it, well, the investors don't want to lose money, but everybody's afraid to take a gamble of any kind, even when it's a pretty well written out gamble like HD radio. So if we don't try something, if we don't have the first failure behind us, we're not going to get to the second generation or the third or the fourth, while other industries are in their 9th or 10th generation and replacing us. I recently built what started out as a podcast studio, 4 microphones, 3 cameras. And when we got done, we have 5 microphones and 5 cameras, and they're selling the studio services to other people in their industry who are coming in, and they're paying good money by the hour to use the facility. And we get feedback. Oh, I've gone to other podcast studios that were 2 chairs and a card table, and this is fantastic. Not a whole lot of broadcast names in there, or a lot of AV names, but they're producing video podcasts, audio podcasts. They can put people on live via some of the over IP technology for audio or video. And we got PTZ cameras in there, all the audio and video recording and editing software. The person who started it is a radio veteran, but nobody else coming in is really broadcast. There's some video people. They took a gamble. Can we build this and sell it and do this at a couple of $1,000s rather than say no because it costs a couple of million? I've always done these kinds of things. I did some work for DC Public Schools back when Livewire and Axia first came out, and we had a challenge in that a vendor had come through and removed every bit of wire that wasn't Cat 5 in the schools and did everything voice over IP. And so they lost all of their connectivity between some classrooms that had been used for audio and video work. They didn't know it until school started. So we went in and we used a bunch of the classic nodes in snake mode to recreate pathways between the rooms. nobody, nobody else had mentioned this. Nobody had thought of it. Nobody
Wow.
mentioned it, and that became several $100,000 of later work.
Wow.
Finding ways to do things differently.
So when you're talking to people who want to have new projects to build, are they indeed asking for multi-use facilities? Are they thinking ahead, or are they thinking right now of radio, podcast,
they're
video?
not really thinking ahead. It is your challenge to figure out. So instead of asking them what they need, what are they? You ask what they want. What are they trying to do? And you sort of have to infer and tell them, okay, based on what I hear you saying, and what, in my experience, I see the industry moving toward. Here's what I suggest you do. They may say no. They may say yes. You know, in the age of the internet, whatever you tell them, they're going to shop it around. They're going to ask other people about your whatever, your equipment list. So you have to be careful. Your technology choices. They're going to come back. You have to anticipate where the client or the client's users may want to go. In this podcast studio, I kept saying, maybe we should do the cameras kind of broadcast style. Now, the vendor had told us just put every camera in front of the microphone up close. Well, I didn't do that. I built a rail down one side of the studio, and we put PTZ cameras on that, and then a couple other places. And the video producer they then hired later on walked in and kind of laughed. He's like, never seen a podcast studio that looked like a TV studio. But they're using it. You know, you can't, since this is new to people, they don't know what they need. It's your job to interpret it and make it so, as you say, it's going to be useful for other things. The same with major technology investments. A lot of people who brought into the AVB standard, or it was an early networking standard, they're finding out that that investment is now 15 to 20 years old. There's new technology, and they spent a lot on a dinosaur.
Yeah. So one thing that I question is, it used to be when we built a radio station with one studio or 5 or 10, we allocated space for what I always called a rack room. Some people call it a central wiring area. Or some people even called it master control, because I guess there was a patch bay in there and you could switch what went to what. But these days, do you have a rule of thumb for the allocation of space for back-end equipment, whether it be nowadays servers or other video switchers or that kind of thing? How do you work that into a build?
Yeah. Just for radio alone, if you're doing it right, it's about roughly a 4-to-1 ratio. For every FM, I'd assume about 4 racks or so. But an FM station is no longer a console, a microphone, a CD, a processor, the transmitter. You've got multiple things leaving the console, mix minuses. That signal you're sending out is maybe a podcast, a broadcast, a web stream. Maybe you're using some revenue enhancement things like Jelly or Futuri. So your broadcast is really 5 or 6 streams. Each of those needs a box. They need power. They need connectivity. One project I was recently involved with, we have 6 stations, I think, in there. I think it's 6. And there's 60 racks. 7 of those racks are just video because, and we've been doing this for a while now, a lot of FMs are building performance studios in their facility. And they've got cameras with PTZ, they've got routers, they've got some form of a recording and playback device, character generators, all sorts of stuff. And maybe they're in the studios, maybe they're in performance space. You may or may not have IT in that room, or they may have their own room, but you're going to have some sharing. So when we built WTMD for Towson University, we filled up 10 racks. Now, that part of that was going back to being able to talk to IT. IT was adamant that they were not going to put any of their equipment in our racks. So how do we get tied in? I said, well, do you have some standards? They said, well, we have a book of them. Send me your standards. I went through it. I said, tell you what, take the first 2 racks. I'm going to wire them the way you want. Switches on the bottom, patch bays on the top. And they said, it's not enough. We don't want to be in your room. So it went around and around, and they ended up extending 48 ports from their switch to my rack. Their switch was literally 15 feet away on the other side of the wall in a little room with a door, so they had their own space.
Oh,
yeah. But we did it IT style, and then I divide things up. I had a STL rack main and a backup rack. We had 2 automation systems in there. Yeah, we don't put as much in the studios as we used to. And part of this is the architects. Architects are pushing for minimal in the rooms. They want lots of open counter space, lots of places for chairs, wheelchairs, ADA compliance. You start putting things up on the top of the counter, you may have an ADA issue. So we get as much of it into a PC with a mouse or touch screen, voice activated or something. Also from a cost standpoint, it costs a lot of money to run a lot of wire, big heavy furniture. We are putting more in the tech room and less in the studios now.
So, yeah, I was just going to comment on that, also based on one of your show notes, is that we do have less in the studio. We don't typically anymore have CD players or cassette players, or maybe not even turntables, except at a very few stations. We don't have reel-to-reel machines. We don't have a lot of these things that, well, cart machines. A lot of it, in fact, for some stations, absolutely everything comes off of a PC, an automation system, and hopefully a backup one. So there's less individual purpose-built things for the inputs. However, and you alluded to it a minute ago, we have more potential outputs or real outputs. Yes. We have the web stream, which may have some different ads on it, or different things than our main FM that's going out, or AM that's going out. We may have a machine that just catches segments or is easy to segmentize for podcasts and republishing later. We may have a machine that is handling video switching automatically for a video web presence, visual radio. So maybe we haven't gotten rid of a lot of gear. We've changed where it is. Yeah.
Yes, but you just mentioned one that's key for radio people. Learn about visual radio. If you've spent time in television, it used to be AFV, audio follows video. Whatever the video switcher did, audio. Visual radio is the other way around. It's video follow audio. Whoever is speaking, or multiple people speaking, controls the switcher that then controls what the viewer and or listener receive. And if nobody's talking, you get a nice big overhead wide shot. So this video is becoming part of the radio experience. You can't even design a radio studio the way you used to, because you've got to be aware of cameras and lighting. And I had one the other day when they changed some things they wanted. They had a video backdrop. We took out the video backdrop. Now they had a window toward the hallway. It was frosted glass, but you still see people walking by. And I said, you got to put a curtain or something. You have to be aware of what else you're going to do besides just play the next record. But going back to, we have less of things. Satellite receivers are going away, whether people realize it or not. We're getting delivery over IP, and I have somebody I'm working on right now. By Saturday, there 6 radio stations. What do we got? I think it's 6 radio stations will all be getting their content over IP. And we're migrating everything to all Axia. They have Axia consoles and all that. But it was amazing how hard it was to explain to the vendor that I know you can support Axia. Why are you still putting a $3,000 sound card in a $1,000 breakout box when you could put a bunch of drivers for less than that? This goes back to being able to explain to people what it is you're trying to do, so they don't just sell you the standard solution that might not do what you need, or might not save you money, might lock you in and make you inflexible.
I'm really glad you're bringing that up. You're bringing up the question over and over again. What is it that you want to do? And you know, years ago, I ran a contract engineering firm back in the late 80s and early 90s. And I had this employee, and I'd love to get him back on this show, but he's out of the industry. I think he's building jet engines for GE or something now. We'd start on a project, and he'd say, "Wait a minute, Kirk." He said, "What is it we're trying to accomplish here?" and he would remind me of, "Oh, okay, well, let's think about it that way." Because I would always be narrowly with blinders on, focused on doing the job one way. And he would say things like, "No, we're going to pull that shelf out of that transmitter. We're going to take it down to the car wash, and we're going to clean it." I said, "You can do that?" "Yes, you can." Yeah. Ask the question, what is it we're trying to do here? And you know, oftentimes you'll get an answer that's really good. Hey, we're talking to Edwin Bukont. Ed Bukont is a system integrator. And we got more stuff coming up in stories from Ed. And also I want to ask Ed about the notion of virtualization. We've talked about, you know, a lot of computers doing things, and I've been kind of on this this ride for a while about, now we got racks full of computers and fans and hard drives. Can we do virtual machines and, you know, use better hardware that's easier to take care of, perhaps. Anyway, but we'll talk about that coming up. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by our friends at Broadcasters General Store, and they represent your buddies, your friends at Inovonics. We're going to hear about the Aaron 655. Be right back.
The Aaron 655 is the latest addition to the Inovonics family of rebroadcast receivers, designed specifically for FM broadcast translators, also referred to as relay transmitters. The Aaron 655 is unique as an uncompromising DSP-based HD radio and FM receiver combined with a powerful 3-band audio processor and dynamic RDS encoder. IP connectivity adds streaming capabilities, and a web browser interface gives you total remote control of the unit from any PC or mobile device. The Aaron 655 gives you maximum flexibility for program sources. Select program audio from analog FM, digital channels HD1 through 8, streaming sources, and analog or AES digital line inputs, all with assignable failover audio backup. The internal RDS encoder allows you to customize your RDS messaging. You can use incoming off-air RDS data, convert HD radio pad data to RDS, convert streamed metadata to RDS, or receive IP telnet data. Comprehensive audio processing includes gated and windowed AGC, a unique syllabic leveler, 3 bands of compression, and both wideband and independent HF limiting. Easy setup is achieved by using 10 factory presets and 10 customizable presets. The processor also supports day parting, allowing automatic preset changes to follow different programming formats throughout your broadcast day. The front panel has an OLED display and jog wheel with intuitive menus for easy setup, advanced control, and editing for all operating parameters. The Aaron 655 dynamic web interface gives you total remote control of the unit from any PC or mobile device. A comprehensive set of menus includes a quick overview of now playing info, input-output control, processor options, RDS encoder, alarms and notifications, SNMP settings, and much more. You can also listen to the live audio broadcast streamed through the web interface.
Here's something really cool about all the products from Inovonics, all the ones that have web GUIs. You can go to the Inovonics website at innovonicsbroadcast.com, innovonicsbroadcast.com, and you can get your own demo right there online. They have under products, they have an online demo center. And if you go there, you get to choose the product you want to look at, and you get to play with it remotely through their web interface. And I really think this is smart of Inovonics to be doing. To get your Inovonics products, call Broadcasters General Store at 352-622-7700, or go online and see them there at bgs.cc, bgs.cc. They carry lots of innovative products, including the product line from Inovonics at innovonicsbroadcast.com, and I highly recommend you try out their online demos. It's really, really cool. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack along with you on TWiRT number 477. We've been doing this for over 10 years now, and I'm here with Ed Bukont. He's a system integrator. And Ed, I had that tailing question there before the spot set about virtualization of computers. I'm not an expert on virtualization, but I believe it's a great way to go. It's not quite putting all your eggs in one basket, and there's ways around that too. It's better hardware, better utilized. At least that's my impression. What are your thoughts at this time?
I don't think it's ripe yet. Yeah, in fact, I'm a little surprised at how hard it seems to be for this to get right. Video seems to have been using it longer than we in audio. Maybe it's the different purposes. In video, you tend to take a lot of long form elements and put them together, create an hour-long package, and that's what you may be playing back. Even if you're playing back multiple bits to a switcher, there still tend to be longer pieces. When you're doing radio, you have a lot of small bits that are executing very quickly. And my experience so far has been that virtualization runs up against real-time processing walls every time. We seem to have to take the DSP brain out of the virtual box rather than having it internalized. You still need a manager that's external. I worked on a project a year ago that they're just finally getting right. They kept blaming the audio over IP drive or this and that. We went in and looked. The errors were internal to the virtual server. So the customer finally, basically told the vendor, either fix it by the end of the week or get your stuff out of here. And so they backed up. They took the virtualization part, the VMware, out of the servers, put it back in a traditional standalone box to manage the network, and all the errors went to zero.
Yeah,
we still have a long way to go.
I've seen, and I'm not an expert at this, so I don't understand about the CPU allocation and allocating cores or virtual cores to a process. I do know that a friend of ours in the industry, Alex Hartman, has demonstrated over 24 automation systems running in one server, and all of them playing out audio at the same time through IP audio drivers. And my own radio stations, I've got between 4 and 5 typically automation systems playing out of off-lease, secondhand servers that honestly cost us about $800, and then with an outboard NAS grabbing the files. And also I've got a machine that's a virtual machine in Hawaii that's running my streaming, and it's doing Omnia 9 processing, which is not a CPU lightweight. It's taking up some processing, and it did take some tweaking to get that right. So I agree with you. People who set up these things may not be aware of the real-time or near real-time nature of the processing that we need, and that is key to success, because we are dealing with unbuffered near real-time audio here, right?
Right. And some of these you're streaming in and out at the same time. If you go back to when we started trying to save money in phone companies, there was a lot of companies running around in the late 90s do what they call bandwidth management. And the idea was to regulate the number of phone calls you had coming in versus the amount going out, so that you only used an average amount of bandwidth over the course of the day.
Yeah.
At every radio station, I had to explain it doesn't work that way for us. We've got contests going on in the studios while sales is dealing with clients. I have the same amount of phone load all day, one side in, one side out. I don't have any point in time when I'm only using maybe in or out. We have that same problem with virtualization. You don't have a situation of, I've got a lot of requests that are simple text messages, essentially, and then we play the audio. No, I'm playing audio at the same time that I'm recording it. Oh, and by the way, if I'm doing HD, I am also dealing with any kind of artwork, maybe that's or streaming. I've got other things the machine is doing at the same time. My RDS, a lot of changes going on. I think virtualization works best when you're dealing with mounting a device that's going to do one thing a lot of the time. When there's a lot of rapid change, that seems to be a problem, at least in my experience.
talk to me about the standard. You were a contributor to the X192 committee with the Audio Engineering Society. That's the committee that came up with AES67. Talk to me about your thoughts about standardization, because you know, when after Livewire came out from the Telos Alliance, or from Telos and Steve Church, you know, after realizing, look, not everybody's going to adopt Livewire, there needs to be a standard, and we're happy to contribute to that. Tell me about your part in contributing to that standard now.
Yeah. This is, if you're going to change the industry, get involved. And I've always gotten involved even when I wasn't asked to. I see things, I speak about them. So I think it was Kevin Gross, who is considered the main architect of this, posted an email on, I think it was broadcast.net, asking if anybody was interested in getting involved. And I was like, sure. And a lot of it was done via email. Most of the technical meetings were in Europe. Somewhere along the line, Cisco was involved. Telos was involved, not just as a technology partner, but also as a financial partner backing this research. I got involved when the question came to what other standards are out there that we don't know about. And I wasn't doing this through Telos. I was independent. So I mentioned WheatNet and some others. And it was interesting to watch the reaction, both from these other companies that were asked to get involved, but also from companies that wanted to be involved, that we said, thank you, but no thank you. We turned down Bonjour as a method of discovery. For a lot of reasons. And there were some people who were very annoyed at that. So what we were trying to do, and I think we succeeded, was come up with the minimum standard necessary for the exchange of audio. We didn't do discovery, we didn't do naming, we didn't do all the things that make Livewire a wonderful platform, because across the pond in Europe, they had Ravenna doing a very similar thing. So a lot of industries had already developed their own solutions. We were trying to provide this glue. I don't think anybody realized how fast this would be adopted. And now we have SMPTE ST2110, which has basically built on the research that started with AES67. It's already being used in the AV world, maybe more than it is in the broadcast world.
Yeah. And it occurred to me that when TV stations started adopting what is essentially AES67, a little slightly different, it's SMPTE 2110-30. When TV started doing it, then AES67 would become easier. The very first implementations of AES67 typically involved copy, paste, type a little bit. It wasn't as easy as the individual manufacturers like Axion, Livewire. Have just point and click and connect, and it was easy. Right. But I think we're going to get more there with the TV world adopting this too. It's got to be easier as more and more people adopt it. And the TV world's pretty big. Big customers, big money.
I think part of that happens because we have a different interaction in radio, especially. We expect the in-house engineer to know everything and do everything. We don't want to pay for the manufacturer to come in and all this. In TV, you buy a system. Some vendors will not even sell you their system unless you buy installation support.
True. Yeah.
So you have the knowledge people on site. And the ones I've usually dealt with have been pretty cool. They stick to their product. They may tell you ahead, hey, we need this and wiring or other things done, and the engineer has to be the gatekeeper and the glue. But we are seeing some of that now, even in radio. These systems are not, even if you're a mom and pop station, these systems are expensive. They're somewhat complicated. We no longer have single circuit connections on XLRs. We have network cabling carrying audio, video, and control. We're still working in the AES67 world on trying to get AES70 to have a control companion to all of this. Whether ST2110 makes that go away or stay, we don't know yet. But there is a difference in approach. When you start building 6 radio stations at one building, you start calling the vendor to come in and help. You can't have your chief engineer sitting there for 2 weeks programming.
There's a concept that you've brought up before, and I like the way you said it. I guess maybe because it's a good good bit of alliteration, and that is mentors of merit. That's a phrase that you've said. What does that mean to you?
You want to find people, either in the industry or allied industries, who can teach you or either watch what you're doing and give you good feedback, or teach you the right way to do things. You and I have both been in this industry long enough to know that there's a lot of guys who keep it on the air, even if they're not doing it right. And then when they go to make a change, it's expensive, it's difficult, if not impossible, because, like you said earlier, you've built this monument to yourself that may not have anything to do with the rest of the industry. You go to make a change. So, when you're doing something, you're making a choice, you need to surround yourself with people who've done this whatever before and are recognized by the industry. I've been lucky. I've had several people who have told me, maybe what you want to do, we're not doing it that way. Or, we like what you're doing, go run with it, but we don't know what you're doing, but it looks good, so go run with it. Let us know if it works. You've got to have a knowledge circle, and maybe not just technology, but when you're designing a studio, you got to worry about ADA issues, fire department, fire safety issues, other code issues. You may have to worry about safety issues depending on what part of town you're in.
Yeah.
You need to have those people who can help you. You're like your own virtual website to pull information from, but they ought to be the right people.
And one more quick topic before we make our final sponsor announcement. And that is, you said you should try to end up being a little bit brand agnostic. And as a employee of a manufacturer, hey man, I'd like you to be loyal. But what do you mean by entertain being brand agnostic?
I didn't say it the right way. I probably should say maybe technology agnostic, because I'm a big fan of especially the Livewire protocol suite, Pathfinder, and all the rest of Axia. I'm not shy about that. I mean, I'll install whatever the customer wants, we'll design it, but if you only use one technology every time, or you make your choices based on keeping what you have working, you're going to build you may end up building a facility that you can't service later on because something key is no longer available. You have to look at the present, the future. That's, is there another way of doing this? When NPR built, let's see, I guess, but yeah, the current facility, there was the folks at NPR wanted to go with one equipment system that had an audio over IP standard, and the folks at Public Radio Satellite wanted another manufacturer that had a different audio over IP standard. Somebody at NPR sat the two of them down, the two vendors down, and said, look, I'm not having this. You two are going to get along, share code, work out something in the way of a common standard. I won't have either one of you in the building. You ought to have to be that way. That's part of pushing the envelope. How do I do this better, faster, cheaper? Are there technologies I should be looking at? Are there vendors? What can I rip out and throw out? We don't build studios with tall, towering racks anymore. We might have 24 monitors in them and a KVM system. Yes. 15 years ago, we didn't have that. The things have changed, and we have to change. You can't just keep building the way you did.
And you've given us a lot of wise sound bites here in the show. I want to ask you because I want to mention again this. What you built studios with the Studio Hub wiring gear,
Yes,
right?
right.
Yeah,
Structured wiring.
Lots of them. Structured
Yes.
wiring. Yeah, and I got to mention again, if you want free cables, you can get free cables from Angry Audio. All you got to do is order the adapter cables, and this particular one has 1/4-inch tip ring sleeve, but you can get them with XLR, male, female. You can get them with RCA connectors. You can get them with bare wire if you want to solder your own connectors on. But
You can also get them in single and dual.
Oh, that's right. You can get them in single and dual. Single being typically for AES digital audio, but for every one of these you order, here's what you do: talk to your favorite dealer, say I want Studio Hub from Angry Audio, and for every one I order, I want a free patch cable, and you get a free 7-foot patch cable. And hey, these are real quality cables. They're also they got a label here that tells the Studio Hub wiring scheme, so you can have that handy for you if you want to know, hey, what was which pair's the left channel, which pair's the right, which one's plus and minus. Do that. angryaudio.com. You got to check them out. They are really hitting on all cylinders for you and me and engineers in the broadcast industry. And when you talk to your dealer, go ahead and order some of these cables. Get your free ones. That free offer ain't gonna last forever. The bins of free cables are being depleted, so you be sure and get yours by asking for them. Tell them you heard about the offer from Kirk Harnack and This Week in Radio Tech, and you'll get taken care of. All right, Ed, you got any parting thoughts for us before we have to go? Got any last words of wisdom? I like your mentors of merit. That was good.
Build with plugs and wheels. Whatever you build today, you're going to take apart and have to move at some point.
Oh,
it's a given. And I've actually done some facilities that way, knowing they were going to move. But be ready to undo your Taj Mahal, because you will be moving it.
So all that stays is the structured wiring.
If you do it right, you can pull that out too.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'd like to hear more about that. That sounds like a webinar from Ed Bukont. Oh, gosh. All right.
Thank you.
Hey, Ed, if people want to get your expertise, how would they get in touch with you?
The business email to probably use is info@e2techserve.com. There's a Facebook page. There's a LinkedIn. There's a Twitter, which Ed in Audio, I think is what I called it. But there is a website to look at. There's some pictures on there, especially the podcast studio is on there. And there's the phone, but probably the email is better. The phone is 240-417-2475.
Well, tell you what, I will put a link to that in the show notes, especially to your website, e2techserve.com. And you are available for projects.
Wherever they are.
Be ready for it to be a good one, because you don't do sloppy work.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, Ed, thanks for being with us on This Week in Radio Tech. Welcome. I really appreciate it. I wish Chris Tobin the very best. He should be back with us next week. He was in some big highfalutin meetings today. And thanks also to, if you watched the pre-show before the show, and I know you didn't know about it because we didn't know about it until a couple hours ago, but Gary Klein joined us from Paris and the Paris radio show, also known as the Salon de Paris, something like that. Anyway, Gary's going to be on to give us some pictures of the studio on a bicycle and this dashboard software, run your entire broadcast facility from one dashboard. Just the stuff you got to see is there. That's being developed in Belgium, and there's some cool stuff. So we'll have Gary on again. And hey, I want to tell you, in an upcoming episode, we've got you haven't met him yet. He's not been on the show before. Ed Noyes from Columbia, South Carolina. Ed is an engineer, great hands-on guy. He's got some good ideas, and he's going to be on to talk about how he's building studios and what's challenging him these days, and maybe some success stories too. We got to go. Thanks to Suncast, our producer, very much for taking care of us again on another show. Thanks to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network. Thanks to Ed Bukont. And on behalf of Chris Tobin, I'm Kirk Harnack. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.